Atlantic Ocean, March 1943. A British merchant ship carries supplies from America to England. Captain Thomas Burke scans the dark ocean. No land for 1,000 miles, just water, and somewhere beneath that water, death. The torpedo hits without warning. No periscope, no submarine visible, just an explosion that tears through the hull below the waterline. The ship shudders. Metal screams. Water pours into the engine room. Burke orders abandon ship. The crew has minutes, maybe less. As lifeboats hit the water, Burke sees it. A conning tower breaking the surface 500 yards away. Then another, then a third. 3 submarines, circling the convoy like wolves around wounded prey. The submarines had been there all along. Submerged, silent, waiting, coordinating their attack. When darkness fell, they surfaced and struck. Not one submarine hunting alone. A pack, working together to kill merchant ships faster than Britain could replace them. The weapon that destroyed Burke's ship was not revolutionary technology. It was a diesel-electric submarine, similar to designs from World War I. But the Germans had changed how they used it. Wolf pack tactics, coordinated night attacks, radio communication between submarines. One U-boat was dangerous. A pack was devastating. Between 1939 and 1945, German U-boats sank over 2,800 Allied merchant ships, more tonnage than any other weapon in the war. They came close to severing Britain's lifeline across the Atlantic, and merchant sailors like Burke learned to fear the dark ocean because beneath the surface, the wolf packs were hunting. The problem facing Germany in 1939 was strategic. Britain was an island. Everything Britain needed came by ship. Food from America, oil from the Middle East, raw materials from the Empire. Cut those supply lines and Britain would starve. The war would end without Germany invading. The weapon for this task was the submarine. Germany could not match Britain's surface fleet. British battleships and destroyers dominated the seas, but submarines could slip past surface ships. They could hunt merchant vessels undetected. They could sink cargo ships faster than Britain could replace them. The Type VII U-boat became Germany's primary submarine. It was 67 meters long, displaced 770 tons surfaced. Crew of 44 men living in impossibly cramped conditions. 4 torpedo tubes in the bow, 1 in the stern. 14 torpedoes total. Diesel engines for surface travel, electric motors for underwater movement. The specifications were unremarkable. Maximum surface speed was 17 knots. Submerged speed was 7 knots. Range was 8,500 nautical miles on the surface. Underwater endurance was measured in hours, not days. The batteries powering the electric motors drained quickly. A U-boat could not stay submerged indefinitely. But the Type VII had advantages. It was relatively cheap to build. Germany produced over 700 of them during the war. They were reliable. They could dive to 230 meters. And they could operate far into the Atlantic where British escorts were spread thin. The early war tactics were simple. U-boats patrolled shipping lanes alone. When a U-boat spotted a convoy, it attacked. Sometimes it succeeded. Sometimes escorts drove it off. Success was random, inefficient. Admiral Karl Donitz recognized this limitation and developed a solution. Wolf pack tactics. Rudel tactic in German. Multiple U-boats working together. Radio communication coordinating attacks. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. One U-boat shadows a convoy and transmits its position. Other U-boats converge. They wait for nightfall. Then they attack simultaneously from multiple directions. The execution was devastating. Escorts could not defend against attacks from multiple bearings. While one escort chased a U-boat on the port side, another U-boat attacked from starboard. Torpedoes came from ahead, behind, and both flanks. Merchant ships had nowhere to turn. The wolf packs operated primarily at night on the surface. This seems counterintuitive. Submarines should hide underwater. But the Type VII was faster on the surface. 17 knots versus 7 knots submerged. Surface running allowed U-boats to overtake convoys and position ahead for attacks. The low profile of a surface submarine was nearly invisible at night. Radar was primitive. Visual detection was almost impossible in darkness. The tactic worked terrifyingly well. In 1940 and 1941, U-boats sank hundreds of merchant ships. Tonnage losses exceeded new construction. Britain's reserves of food and fuel dropped month by month. By late 1942, Britain had weeks of food remaining. The wolf packs were winning the Battle of the Atlantic. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. Merchant sailors faced impossible odds. 1 in 4 would not survive the war. Men signed up to carry cargo and found themselves in a battle they could not fight. No weapons, no armor, just hope that their ship would not be the one torpedoed. The psychological toll was severe. Every voyage across the Atlantic was Russian roulette. You could see enemy aircraft, you could watch for surface ships, but U-boats were invisible. The first sign of danger was the explosion. Then you had minutes to abandon ship in the middle of the ocean. Survivors spent hours or days in lifeboats waiting for rescue. Many never came home. The Allies developed countermeasures slowly and painfully. Convoy system became mandatory. Merchant ships traveled in groups with naval escorts. Destroyers and corvettes armed with depth charges hunted submarines. The problem was there were never enough escorts. The Atlantic was vast. U-boats operated in areas escorts could not reach. Sonar technology improved. ASDIC could detect submerged submarines, but it had limitations. Range was short. Accuracy was poor. A skilled U-boat commander could evade sonar, and wolf packs attacked on the surface at night, where sonar was useless. Aircraft became critical. Long-range patrol aircraft covered convoys during daylight. U-boats had to submerge when aircraft appeared. This slowed them down and limited their effectiveness. But there was a gap. Mid-Atlantic air cover was impossible with existing aircraft range. The gap became known as the Black Pit. U-boats operated there with impunity. The turning point came in 1943. Multiple factors combined to shift the balance. Escort carriers brought aircraft to mid-Atlantic. Longer-range patrol aircraft closed the Black Pit. Radar improved dramatically. Centimetric radar could detect surfaced U-boats at night. The wolves could no longer hide. Cryptanalysis broke German naval codes. British intelligence could read U-boat radio traffic. They knew where wolf packs were forming. Convoys were rerouted around known U-boat positions. The advantage swung to the Allies. U-boat losses escalated. In May 1943 alone, 41 U-boats were sunk. Donitz withdrew submarines from the North Atlantic temporarily. The withdrawal marked the turning point. The wolf packs had lost the Battle of the Atlantic, but the cost had been staggering. Over 2,800 Allied merchant ships sunk, 14 million tons of cargo lost, 30,000 merchant sailors dead, 5,000 Allied naval personnel killed fighting U-boats. Germany lost 783 U-boats and over 30,000 submariners. The casualty rate for U-boat crews was 75%, the highest of any branch of any military in the war. The Type VII U-boat was not technologically advanced. Later in the war, Germany developed the Type X1, true submarines capable of remaining submerged for weeks, faster underwater than on the surface. But the Type X1 came too late. The war ended before they could affect the outcome. The legacy of the Wolfpack tactic shaped naval warfare. Modern submarine warfare still uses coordinated attacks. Nuclear submarines operate in groups. Communication allows coordination across vast distances. The concept Donitz pioneered remains relevant. The U-boat campaign demonstrated the vulnerability of sea supply lines. Island nations depend on maritime trade. Submarines threaten that trade. The Battle of the Atlantic was as important as any land battle. Britain's survival depended on merchant ships reaching port. Germany came closer to winning through U-boats than through any other weapon. Atlantic Ocean, March 1943. Captain Burke watches his ship sink from a lifeboat. 3 conning towers circle in the darkness. The submarines hunt for their next target. Burke and his crew drift in the cold Atlantic night. Rescue will come eventually, but the supplies his ship carried will never reach England. The German U-boat Wolfpack was not the most advanced weapon of the war. It was not the deadliest in individual encounters, but it sank more Allied tonnage than any other weapon. It nearly starved Britain into surrender, and it created a terror that merchant sailors carried with them on every Atlantic crossing. The fear of the invisible hunter. The submarine pack that struck without warning from beneath the dark water. That was the U-boat Wolfpack, and it came closer to changing the war's outcome than anything Germany deployed.